Nice. So today we're gonna dive into something pretty heavy.
Yeah.
We're gonna be looking at the final days of Auschwitz
Right.
in January 1945, and specifically using this YouTube transcript from, I think it's called like World War II, something like that.
Okay.
And it goes into a lot of detail about, even as the Red Army is approaching, and it's really just a matter of time
Right.
before the Third Reich collapses.
Yeah.
The suffering inside Auschwitz just doesn't end.
Right. Yeah.
It continues.
It's interesting, isn't it, that even when the writings on the wall and the
Yeah.
defeat is unavoidable,
Yeah.
the machinery's still working.
Yeah. It really is. Like when you think about January 1945,
Right.
I mean, that's just a few months before the end of the war in Europe.
Yeah.
And to think about the scale of what's still going on inside Auschwitz,
Yeah.
it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. It's hard to comprehend.
Yeah, so the transcript kind of starts out and it outlines these, sort of key figures during these last days.
Okay.
And we have, SS Hauptsturmführer Josef Kramer,
Right.
essentially an SS captain who, while he's still technically the commandant,
Yeah.
he's already left to go take over Bergen-Belsen.
Okay.
So operationally, the camp is now headed by SS Sturmbannführer Richard Baer, who had been the commandant of Auschwitz I.
Right.
And looming over everything, of course, is, Heinrich Himmler's order.
Himmler's chilling order, a couple of months before, no prisoner was to be, allowed to fall
Right.
alive into enemy hands.
Yeah, and that really fuels Baer's preparations, which include, not only evacuation plans, but also potentially just mass killing all the remaining inmates.
Yeah.
And part of this, final sort of desperate period involves just eliminating evidence.
Right.
Himmler commands the destruction of the crematoria and the gas chambers, and Baer's, trying to figure out how to carry out this order.
Yeah.
What does that tell you about their mindset?
I think what you're seeing there is just the
I mean, it's beyond just avoiding legal consequences.
right. Yeah, you have this deeper urge to just obliterate
Yeah,
what they've done and try and erase it from history itself.
right.
Even the world's closing in on them.
Yeah.
It's this profound and ultimately futile attempt to just rewrite their narrative.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a powerful image.
Yeah, and amidst this destruction and this sort of frantic attempt to cover up what they've done,
Right.
the atrocities just continue.
They do.
And the transcript gives this particularly upsetting example. On January 5th at Block 11,
Right.
they hold a Gestapo summary court proceeding.
Yeah.
This ends up being the last one at Auschwitz.
Oh, wow.
They condemn 70 Polish men and women to death,
What?
and they're taken to the now defunct Crematorium 5 and executed, but before they're killed, several of them carve their names and messages to their loved ones into the walls of their cells.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
incredible.
It really is this like final act of defiance and this attempt to leave some kind of trace of their existence.
Wow.
And then, if you think about that, the very next day on January 6th,
Yeah.
we have, another horrific event occurring alongside what seems like just a normal logistical movement.
Okay.
You have Ella Gertner-Robota, Regina Safir, and Estera Walkblum.
Right.
These were the brave women who had supported the October uprising within the camp.
Right.
They're hanged.
Wow.
On that same day, 1,004 female prisoners are transferred to Bergen-Belsen.
Okay.
Now, the transcript notes this was just a standard transfer. This
Yeah.
wasn't part of the mass evacuations, yes?
Gotcha.
But it does highlight this really unsettling combination of ongoing terror
Yeah.
and these logistical shifts that are happening as the Nazi regime is starting to collapse around them.
Right. Right. So the chaos is kind of increasing, but the machine's still operating.
Yeah. I mean, it's just business as usual for them in some ways.
Yeah.
And as January continues, the transcript paints this really, bleak picture.
Okay.
Death rates escalate dramatically just
Yeah.
due to exhaustion,
Right.
widespread malnutrition,
Right, yeah.
diseases rampant.
Makes sense.
Then around mid-January, things get even more critical.
Okay.
The Red Army launches its major Western offensive on January 13th.
Right.
So this obviously brings liberation closer.
Yeah.
But it also triggers this, final desperate and brutal actions
Right.
by the SS.
Yeah.
And as you go through the transcript, you see these little, tragic events that are happening. The births of 3 boys in the women's camp on January 14th,
Oh, wow.
none of whom survived.
Oh, my gosh.
The continued, though dwindling arrival of prisoners
Yeah.
who are transferred in from other camps.
Yeah.
Even a detail about how a U.S. reconnaissance plane
Oh, wow.
observes the nearly fully repaired IG Farben plant.
Oh, wow.
Just highlights this bizarre continuation of certain aspects of the Nazi war machine,
Right.
almost until the very last moment.
Yeah.
And amidst all of this unimaginable suffering, the plunder continues.
Right.
The final shipment of valuables stolen from the murdered,
Yeah.
the contents of this infamous Canada depot,
Right.
leaves for Gross Rosen on January 15th.
Wow.
And the sheer scale of the theft is staggering. I mean, 1 million items of clothing alone packed into 95,000 crates.
That's incredible.
And then, of course, the Sonderkommando.
Yeah.
These are the prisoners who were forced to deal with the bodies in the crematoria.
Right.
They received orders to dismantle the very machinery of death.
Oh, wow.
Cremation and gassing equipment's loaded onto trains destined for Gross Rosen.
Okay.
And then they're told to start preparing for the complete destruction of these sites,
Yeah.
drilling holes for explosives in the walls of the crematoria and the gas chambers.
Yeah. So they're really trying to hide it at this point.
Yeah.
Erase it completely.
Yeah, they're trying to just blow it all away.
Wow.
Then we get this chilling census of the remaining prisoners on January 17th.
Okay.
They do this final roll call.
Yeah.
Nearly 67,000 people across the main camp and the numerous subcamps.
Wow.
The vast majority are adults and adolescents.
Right.
But there are also a few hundred children.
Oh, wow.
And at least one infant, a baby named Angela Ottfesbein, who had been hidden within the camp.
Wow.
Incredibly, she and another child who was born just before liberation named Georgi Faludi are the only two known survivors out of the hundreds of children who were born inside Auschwitz.
Oh, my gosh. That's incredible.
And this roll call marks the true beginning of the evacuations.
Okay.
And the prisoners who are deemed simply too weak or too ill to walk are left behind, often to be shot.
Oh, my God.
The rations that are provided to those who are forced to march are just pitiful. 3 potatoes and 2 pieces of cheese, meant to last them for 16 days.
16 days on that.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
And so as the evacuations commence, key figures within the camp administration begin making their own escapes.
Okay.
Dr. Joseph Mengele, the infamous Angel of Death, destroys his lab.
Wow.
And his records of his human experimentation before fleeing towards Berlin.
Of course.
Other SS doctors follow suit, also destroying their medical files.
All right.
But even amidst all of this, there are these amazing acts of resistance.
Oh, really?
The leaders of the camp resistance managed to smuggle out their final message.
Wow.
It's a desperate plea for help and for the world to truly understand what's been happening. They say, we are afraid that the SS will return to exterminate those who have remained here.
Right.
For this reason, we implore you, help us. Help us as quickly as you can.
Oh, my gosh.
And their message also highlights the crucial role of these documents that they've already sent out and carefully buried to ensure that, the truth would come to light.
That's incredible, that foresight.
And then on January 18th, we have the arrival of the last registered prisoner at Auschwitz.
Wow.
Engelbert Markic.
Okay.
He's assigned number 202,499.
Wow.
He's a convicted felon being processed through the system.
Wow, so the system's still working?
Yeah, and even as he arrives, countless columns of prisoners are being forced out onto these death marches.
Wow.
The scale of it is just staggering, column after column of men, women, and children.
Right.
Many of them already, severely weakened by starvation and disease, forced into these freezing winter conditions.
Oh, gosh.
The transcript notes that even by January 20th, the camp commandant Baer himself has finally left.
Okay.
And as the SS retreats, their barbarity doesn't cease.
Right.
The transcript details the murder of approximately 200 Jewish women who emerged from a barracks only to be shot down just outside the camp gates. The blowing up of crematoria 2 and 3 by SS demolition teams just further illustrates this, desperate and ultimately futile attempt at concealment.
Right.
By January 21st, the main camp and the majority of the subcamps are evacuated.
Okay.
Around 60,000 emaciated people are forced onto these death marches in absolutely brutal winter conditions.
Yeah.
The death toll is catastrophic.
Yeah.
They give this example of the Janina Grub subcamp.
Okay.
800 prisoners are marched out, but only 200 reach Gross Rosen alive.
Wow.
And back in the camps, even with the vast majority of prisoners gone, The remaining SS continue their horrific actions.
Oh, really?
The transcript details this terrible event at the Gleiwitz V and Chekowitz vacuum subcamps,
Okay.
where sick and weakened prisoners are deliberately locked inside barracks that are then set on fire,
Oh, my God.
and those who try to escape are machine gunned.
Wow.
They just systematically murder those who are too weak to march. But even in these darkest of hours, the spirit of resistance flickers.
Really?
We have this incredible story of the 5 women at Birkenau who managed to kill a guard.
Oh, wow.
And with the SS largely absent from some areas,
Yeah.
prisoners raid the abandoned food stores.
Oh, wow.
And they experience this brief moment of, defiance and even celebration amidst the horror.
Yeah.
And then on January 25th, we learn about this really chilling bureaucratic detail.
Okay.
The head of the SS Main Economic and Administrative Office.
Right.
This is the very organization that's responsible for the administration of Auschwitz and the exploitation of its victims.
Yeah.
He's awarded the German Cross in silver for his excellent work.
Oh, my gosh.
That's just this utter disconnect between, this so-called award and the reality on the ground.
Yeah.
And on that same day, the SS continues its murderous actions.
Oh.
Jewish prisoners in both the women's and men's camps are specifically targeted.
Right.
Some manage to hide themselves away, but many others are rounded up, marched out, and murdered.
Oh, wow.
Finally, in the early hours of January 26th, the last standing crematorium, number 5, is blown up.
Oh.
At this point, the sounds of artillery fire are growing closer.
Yeah.
A clear signal of the imminent arrival of the Red Army.
Right.
And then on January 27th, liberation finally comes.
Yeah.
First, Auschwitz, the Third-Monowitz,
Okay.
where Soviet doctors find and immediately begin treating the remaining sick prisoners.
Right.
Then around noon, the advance on the main Auschwitz camp begins.
Okay.
And by 3 p.m., Soviet troops enter Auschwitz.
Wow.
There's this really powerful account from Alexander Vorontsov,
Yeah.
the camera operator who recorded the liberation.
Right.
He describes, the skeletal survivors, their vacant gazes, the horrifying piles of clothing pots, even human remains.
Yeah.
And the scale of the horror was beyond comprehension.
Yeah.
Even for these, seasoned military personnel
Right.
who had already witnessed so much.
Yeah. I mean, what must that have been like for them to encounter something like that?
Yeah. I mean, you have Dr. Irina Konechna, one of the prisoners who had stayed behind to care for the sick.
Right.
She recalls, the joyous reaction of the prisoners to their liberators
Yeah.
and this unexpected kindness of the Soviet soldiers who immediately provided them with food.
Wow.
The numbers, when you consider them, are just staggering and heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Of the 1.3 million people who arrived at Auschwitz, over 1 million were murdered. Only around 8,000 were found alive at liberation.
Wow.
Countless others perished on those death marches.
Right.
The transcript breaks down the nationalities and the toll Soviet prisoners of war,
Yeah.
Sinti and Roma people,
Right.
non-Jewish Poles,
Right.
and hundreds of thousands of Jewish people from across Europe.
Wow.
The transcript concludes with this powerful reflection, describing Auschwitz as the gates that open on a deep chasm into our deepest depravities.
Wow.
And it serves as this, stark and crucial warning
Right.
that every act of hatred carries the risk of reopening those very gates.
I mean, that's so important for all of us to remember that this didn't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah.
That, these were all individual human choices that were made.
Yeah.
And that we all have that responsibility.
Right.
To not let this happen again.
Yeah, to fight against those, those impulses within ourselves and within our societies.
Absolutely.
So yeah, never forget.
Never forget.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
We'll see you next time.
See ya.